Greetings, everyone. We'll get started in a few moments. Okay, folks, we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. What we're going to talk about today is digital archives, a concept around records management, but how records management, one, is critical to your organization, but also how it is critical to your AI strategy. And talk about it from the perspective of forms and documents that you are generating or that your users, your customers, whoever it is filling out inside of it. So the first thing, though, I want to mention is that this session is being recorded. The recording will be available to you as video. So if you are uncomfortable with that, please let us know afterwards, and we're happy to do this session in a non-recorded fashion afterwards. But you can also view it that way. Anyone who's registered will be able to get access to it. A little background about myself. I am the Vice President of Strategic Engagement with 4Point. Been here about 6 years. I think it's 7 years, actually. I've worked in digital forms and electronic forms, records management and document management for a very long time, over 35 years. And in that time, I've seen a lot of things that work and a lot of things that don't work. To give you a little bit of insight beyond just the technical side of things, I have 3 dogs, Bella, Piper, and Buddy, and I love to cook. One of the reasons I love to cook is that it's nice and stable. Is when I'm chopping a carrot, I don't have to worry about whether or not the knife is all up to date. So the focus is much more disciplined, and I certainly enjoy that aspect of it. Because of my depth of experience, that's why I want to talk to you today about digital archives and how they're critical from a forms perspective, from a document perspective as a whole, from a data perspective also. But what we're going to do is focus on the document perspective of the things. There is a chat window, a Q&A area. Ask any questions that you've got in there. Put them in, and I leave some time at the end, and I will address your questions along with that. Also, if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to send us an email. There'll be a link later on, an email address. Feel free to send an email to us. Happy to answer your questions afterwards. We've covered welcome and housekeeping. I'm going to talk about what is digital archiving and digital archiving specific to forms and filled forms, and we'll get into a little definition. Why it matters we're going to focus on financial institutions, but it really affects everybody. And it really affects everybody who's trying to focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning inside their organization with their information and expanding its capabilities. Going to give you some customer examples, talk about some use cases, the ROI, and how you can get started, and then the Q&A. But let's jump in with what are we talking about? What we're talking about is collecting, storing, managing the completed forms that your users, your employees, your partners, all of those individuals are filling out on your behalf. And by and large, in our experience, you're doing that today, but the way that you're doing it is that you're scanning the images of the documents that are being brought in. So somebody's downloading a fillable PDF, maybe in Reader, maybe in an Acrobat form. They're filling it out, then they're printing that, maybe signing it, probably signing it. And then they're taking a scanned image and sending it in. Or if you're like me, I fill it out in the form, I save it as a PDF locally, and then I open up my copy of Reader and I drag my signature across, drop it on, and then I send that to you in an email as a flattened PDF. And that's a better process. But the challenge with all of that is that we're not capturing all of the pieces associated with it. The other problem with a lot of that is that for a lot of organizations, once they've extracted the data from the OCR'd images or from the PDF documents that are coming in, they often don't have a good storage policy, a good records retention policy around the actual original documents. And there's a lot of things that we can do with well-stored records to enhance your organization. One of the things that we want in an archival system is things like metadata tagging, version control if you're getting multiple copies or getting it in process, or if it has to go for internal approvals, role-based access for your organization to ensure the right people can get access to it, that it will last for a long period of time. And we'll talk about record retention in a bit. But what are the retention policies? How long do you need to keep it? How immutable does it need to be during that period of time? And how are we preserving the content that we've got and the context that we've got from those documents? A lot of organizations are still using paper mechanisms to communicate with customers. There is an entire industry around scanning OCR and processing inbound paper documents. And a lot of organizations are still struggling with that because users don't want that experience, and organizations spend a lot of money processing that on the inside. And what comes out from that, while usable in the organization, is not suited for where organizations are trying to go. But they're also very costly, $6 to $8 per paper document, okay? And they get misfiled all the time. The OCR doesn't read it quite right. It's got to go to somebody. The image got stored with incorrect metadata. Now you really can't find it, or you can't find it as efficiently as you should. That spends a lot of productivity time. And so good records management around your forms leads to improved productivity capabilities. And there are compliance risks. The inability to find a document may be related to Sarbanes-Oxley, may be related to compliance, regulatory situations, audit purposes, legal scenarios. There's all sorts of different pieces associated with that. And in your organization, there's people who are thinking about this, but may not be aware of the value of storing this information in a more usable format. Some considerations when you're dealing with archiving of these filled forms, these documents that are coming in with user information on them, is how do we focus on receiving the filled form from the user? Remember, I mentioned I saved it as a PDF, I dragged my signature, and then I emailed it back in. Well, if you're allowing email back in, you may be able to improve that experience. First, better user experience, only slightly, but better. But now, could you package that inside the form so that you actually got data along with it, and you could parse the data out and save a PDF? Better experience because we can get the PDF and the transaction at the same time. What about a scenario where we're filling it out online in a browser and we send the PDF to the user as a record, but we keep only the data? Do we need to keep the context? Or if we do, we store it in there. But one of the critical factors is to identify, understand, and document why this form is being retained. And this comes back to a concept of source of truth. What is the source of truth? If an auditor comes in and says, I need to see everything related to X, where do they have to look? You've got systems that have that information and forms that represent the transactions that influence the systems. And if they disagree, what's the source of truth, right? This is also critical in compliance scenarios and critical in legal scenarios. There's a lot of discussion around how discovery processes in lawsuits need to access the information. And one of the things that has been discovered associated with that, and the courts are better now, but is if you don't have clear record retention policies, or you violate those policies. For example, if you say, we keep the PDFs, we don't keep the paper, and someone kept the paper, the courts can go, but you had to have paper for all of it, right? And now you're in a scenario as, can they trust your records? And those can all be issues associated with it. And we've seen these in various legal cases where the information being provided is not what the court's looking for. And so that's a challenge associated with it, right? And so we can see that when we talk about, and I'm going to focus on financial institutions here, because a lot of you are from that, is why archiving these things are so critical inside of financial institutions. It's regulatory compliance, as we talked about. It's the record keeping rules. It's preserving all of the communications. And a form is an aspect of communications. And so we need to ensure that it's kept with the same kind of rigor that everything else is, all right, as it's filled out. Legal protection. We talked a bit about the courts, the legal aspect of it for discovery, having a process, a defined process says this is how we do it, and we can demonstrate compliance. Therefore, there are no other documents related to this piece of litigation or this case or whatever it happens to be. Governance. You need it all for governance. Again, that comes back to a source of truth question. What is the source of truth? Why am I keeping the document? One of the aspects that we talk about is if you're never going to look at the document, then why are you keeping the document? But if you need the document, then you need to keep it in a form that you can be assured that you can get it at some future point in time, and that it is still contextually relevant and comprehensible in that scenario. But the other key reason is improved efficiency and cost savings. People can find things better, that increases their productivity, but you can do more with that. And it comes down to increasing the user experience so that it's a better experience for the user, because you're not forcing them to print paper because you don't want to deal with the paper. Risk mitigation, business continuity, having those things. But also institutional memory, and this is where we start to link into AI capabilities, is the ability to have this in a highly structured manner with metadata that we can look at, but is actual data. It is a filled PDF document that we're recording, not an image, so that AI can look at the data and understand the data in the data context and provide advice based on that, or be used to influence, trained on this so that it can influence future decisions, so that we can understand that what's going on in there better, not just data analysis, but contextual analysis. And I want to talk about that comparison of digital archiving and scanning. And there's been a lot of activity that's occurred in past years where we want to scan it because paper is still coming into the organization, and therefore we need to still scan. And while that may be a consideration, your users don't want to do that, and you're losing out on capabilities by doing the scanning. And let's talk about it from an AI perspective, is if you're training an AI on images, you're going to get images as output, and that's not what you're looking for. So what we want to do is train it on data, and a filled PDF stored in a PDF-A archive, which I'll talk about later, is in fact a piece of data. It is a structured document, and that means the AI can learn a whole lot more about it and can do more in future with it. It can extrapolate more from it than it can from the images. Right? And so when we talk about the digital archiving, what we're talking about is metadata, versioning, searchability, rich context that I can go in to extract that information to use, for example, AI to be able to go find me the documents. And this is critical in audit scenarios, critical in the litigation scenarios. Well, let's let the AI do that. So we trust the metadata, but maybe that's not enough. And we need more context to it. If it's an image, we only got the OCR piece associated with it, which may not be enough or may be very difficult to comprehend associated with it. Preservation. While images are decent in preservation, one of the things about the PDF-A that we recommend for this kind of a scenario is it's built for long-term compliance so that you can get that data all the way along. So there's a lot of good reasons why we want to do this, but scanning and storing the actual document is not the same. I'm going to talk about some customer examples. I'm going to talk about a state division of child support. And the scenario that they've got is they produce the critical documents for a wide range of different audiences: custodial parents, non-custodial parents, employers where there's a situation of garnishee of wages, the lawyers involved in a custodial case, the courts involved, the IRS, because they transfer financial data back and forth. So there's a lot of regulatory compliance and audit rules associated with all that. The documents are actually, in many cases, complex packages of multiple different documents, forms that were assembled together based on information that was provided by the caseworker and from the case management solution. So it brings together these two different things to create those documents. And those documents then get parsed out, and they may be different, they're different languages, different people, different things. So in their case, what they're doing to ensure long-term retention and availability is they're generating the packages in the PDF-A standard. That is an ISO standardized version of the portable document format, PDF, specifically for the use in archiving and long-term preservation of electronic documents. So I put the link, the Wikipedia page link in. That's a great place to start. Okay. And what it does is it includes all sorts of extra information so that in future, a PDF reader can render that the way that it was originally intended to be. That's a critical factor in long-term preservation. But I can't emphasize strongly enough, the reason why that works is because PDF is a standard, and PDF is fundamentally an XML document structure. It has all sorts of information in XML. You can open it up. You can open up any PDF in a notepad, and it's XML. So you can now do things with that, like AI, that you can't do with an image, that you can't do out of the context, right? And in this particular case, the document packages are tightly linked to the case data. They often report the case data or parts of the case data. So the case management system has become the index and provides the metadata that they're using for that. There's a tight linkage between there, because even a case, and they have very, very strict retention rules, a case that exists, for example, that relates to a child who is currently 5, needs to be retained until that child is 18, and then there are specific dispensation rules based on the nature of the case, the personnel involved, and all those. Might be destroyed at that point in time, might be retained longer, all of those. So they have very detailed retention rules associated with that, and the case management system is handling a lot of the access associated with that. Give you another example. And this is the US Government Printing Office. And what they do is they generate PDF documents for access by the public. They take multiple sources of that information and they merge that all together into one PDF document that represents the piece of legislation, the executive order, the minute meetings from committees, whatever it happens to be. And the final document is signed by a GPO certificate, so that the viewer of that knows that is the official document and it has not been tampered with. That's stored in a special archive. That's stored in an archive that is publicly searchable and available. There's a tremendous amount of metadata that goes along with that, so that citizens can go in, search for what they're looking for, get a précis of the information, that's metadata associated with it, know where it was, who was it, who was involved, all of those things, and then pull up the actual document. And GPO is looking at AI capabilities to go in and assist on that search because they've got all the PDFs. They've got everything in a form that can be easily fed into and really support an AI searching capability or an AI comprehension capability. So that really gets you where they want to go in terms of using AI as a tool to assist citizens in finding what they need from the general printing office. I want to talk about some common pitfalls that we see. You must have a proper retention and disposition policy. I hear a lot of organizations say, keep everything forever, and that is not a retention policy. That is not a good policy. It's a very, very bad policy. In fact, seems easy, okay? Seems like the way that we should do it. But in fact, there are specific rules as to why things need to be removed at a certain point in time. But it needs to be something that is communicated across the entire organization. One of the challenges we see is that there are official retention policies for certain kinds of records in an organization, but that a branch or a department, a group might just create a form and gather some data from customers, but they don't have a policy associated, or they're not even aware that there's a policy associated with it. Now, that could be okay because it's transitory information, but it does represent a transaction that has value if we're going to use that as part of AI training. So then we now need to incorporate it in the retention policy. That also, the retention policy may be different, is different for different groups, for different documents, for different circumstances. And it needs to take that into account. There is no one size fits all. What you use for financial documents, for a public-facing company versus a private company are different. If you have the Division of Child Support, where they have to keep document retention is all of the related information and documentation associated with this case until the child is 18. That's a whole different set of policies. And then what do we do afterwards? And part of the policy is, how do we dispose of that? You must dispose of documents properly. How do we dispose of that? When do we dispose of that? How do we audit that we've disposed of that? Have proper metadata and a proper taxonomy. Taxonomy is a structure of metadata, how we store it. It's not just the name of the file. That's really bad. Have in your records management or your archiving storage system, have a place for other information. When was it created? When was the transaction occurred? When is it going to be removed from the system? All of those kinds of things. And a proper tool will provide you with those. Know what the purpose of the archive is. Okay, what is the source of truth? When should documents be retrieved? Why should the documents be retrieved? Often we get into circumstances we go, okay, so what are you going to do with this document when you retrieve it? You've taken the data out of it, you put the data into the business system, you've got the document. Are you ever going to look at it? Well, no, there's no reason why. Well, then don't keep it. Okay. Oh no, there is a reason. We're going to use it to train the AI. Okay, then that's different. We need to put it over there for the training of the AI. Oh no, it has a signature on it, and the signature represents the authorization to do this. So it is the proof of approval on it. Okay, but have an agreement inside your organization of what is the source of truth. Is if there's a discrepancy between the data in the business system and the document with the signature, which one wins? Okay, you need to know those kinds of things. I say do not keep paper. Try desperately not to keep paper. You should not keep paper. And because if you go and you keep paper, one, it doesn't really help you. Two, it's going to be a struggle to find it. And three, there's going to be a whole discussion of why have you got paper for some of it and you don't have paper for others, right? So really try not to. And don't keep images of the paper. Try to get the original if you possibly can. Not all circumstances you can, but you should be limiting that, and you should know when you're doing it, and it should be documented in your standards why you're doing it, when you're doing it, and what the circumstances are for transitioning it. Let's talk a little bit about AI and how it can do things. So these are some examples that we've heard of, mostly in financial areas, but it's predictive risk analysis using archived records. The ability to go in and analyze applications, credit reports, communications, transactions associated that would lead to risk analysis so that the AI can learn this was a good one, this was a less good one, and now it can create a better understanding from all of the data and documents, all right, to improve accuracy in fraud detection, risk analysis, and credit scoring. And that's going to support proactive risk management strategies. So the ability to use your extensive archive of information in a data format, be able to then have the AI learn from that, trained on that, to be able to then make predictive analysis and be more efficiently used in future. And this hinges on having all of that in a data format. Detection for audit and compliance, where now we can have machine learning, and this is similar to what GPO is talking about doing, is go in and analyze all of the existing contracts, loans, whatever it happens to be, looking for specific pieces of information for purposes of an audit or to demonstrate compliance. Right? So this becomes an analysis of the actual information and documents so that you can confirm to an auditor, confirm to a compliance review that we are matching up to it. This is going to reduce effort. It's going to speed up the audit times associated with it. And it can be used to help identify your obligations, deadlines, compliant risks, scenarios that are gapped. So it becomes a really powerful tool on those. But again, you got to have all the documents in a form that makes sense to the AI, that the AI can then use for that purpose. Another area is around environmental, social, and governance indicators, being able to look for those documents across all of the different things to monitor trends in sustainability. A lot of organizations have compliance or have directives associated with this. So this allows you to go in and ensure that your contracts, documents, and all of those are contributing to that, or ones that are specific associated with that, analyzing it, again, both from a compliance perspective and a communication to shareholders perspective and an audit perspective. But what it can also be used is to say, what have we done in the past to identify areas of improvement for the future? And now we're using AI to understand our current situation and look for predictive elements that can ensure that we do a better job going forward. Well, what changes should occur in contractual language that would make it stronger, better going forward? So these are the areas that some organizations are looking at. Use cases across operations, and we touched on a lot of these, a lot of different compliance, merger and acquisition due diligence, the ability to go in and analyze a lot of pieces of data. Due diligence in a merger and acquisition, especially a significant one, can be very, very substantial. And if you have to wade through tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of images to gather that information and understand the obligations on the other side, that can be a tremendous issue too. If you have to provide that as part of a due diligence analysis, having all that archived is going to save you time and effort associated with it, and the AI can speed that up substantially. Knowledge retention, the ability inside the organization to use the knowledge of how documents were processed, how they were entered by people, what transactions, what you used in the past to train new people in your organization, to give them a leg up, or so that they can query things. I need to produce a form that does this. What have we done in the past related to this? So there's a lot of areas that can really be improved because we can bring those two things together and use what's gone on, because we have a good archive of what's gone on, to better influence what we're going to do in the future. In terms of ROI and strategic impact, cost savings, speeding things up, and improving productivity, really making And this is what we see as AI as the assistant to you. By giving you AI with a good archive that it can really use, that can be trained on properly, that's going to enhance the productivity of individuals in the organization that need to search through that thing, find things, or create new things based on what's gone on in the past. And certainly this leads to compliance improvements, productivity improvements associated with compliance and audits. And it also sets you up for new potential innovations, because now you have a lot of that data in one place. So now when you're going to say, well, how would I change things? You have a strong foundation of information to be able to know what you're going to change. This is a lot of information. We've covered a lot of ground on a lot of different areas. And we know that your situation is unique. You've got special considerations. And so what we're offering is, let's have a further discussion. We'd love to sit down with you, offer you a 1-hour one-on-one session where, as me and your organization, talking about what your unique challenges are, how we might address those, what you should be looking for to address your scenarios, how we fit in those different pieces to get you that digital archive that might make sense. Or talk about AI. You say, I've got a good archive. How do I use AI? Those kinds of things. It can be as wide ranging as you want. We are happy to do that. Also, if you have any other questions about what we've talked about here, marketing@4point.com. Be happy to answer any of your questions, or reach out to your sales rep or any contacts. You can also reach out to me, eric.stevens@4point.com. And with that, I will move on to any questions. As I mentioned, ask your questions in the chat if you've got any. We've got some time left. And I see a couple. Okay. What features do you look for in an archival system? So that's a really interesting question that is very, very large, because you may have multiple different requirements for multiple different groups depending on those kinds of things. But at a minimum, it needs a way of storing a wide range of documents, because you might be storing PDFs, you might be storing other kinds of documents in there. It needs a strong metadata capability with a lot of customization. And it needs the ability to understand retention rules and be able to notify appropriate people, usually records managers, but records management, business, potentially IT, of this is the time for this. This is what needs to happen with this. There's a ton of good examples out there. One of the most common nowadays is Microsoft SharePoint. And Microsoft SharePoint, when used as a records management archival tool, has a lot of these strong capabilities built into it, with a lot of good permission structures and nicely browser based. So that's one example of the kind of features that you want in. Now, there is a difference between a document management solution, which SharePoint is often used as, is if we'll pick on that as the example, and a records management solution. Records management doesn't have the concept of editing or check in, check out. It has the concept of a record that can be accessed, okay, and a record that has rules associated with how long it should stay around and who can access it, how it can be used, and often has strong metadata built on long-term retention. A document management solution is more, I've got Word documents, I need to edit them, I need to check them in, check them out, I need version control on them, multiple people are commenting on them, and that's a separate thing. So keep those two pieces independent in your head. Things like SharePoint often overlap and blur those, right? And they often have overlapping capabilities. Well, a document management system has really strong search capabilities, so you can find the documents you're supposed to be working on. A records management has strong search capabilities, so you can find what you need to find. So there's a lot of interaction to it, but those are the kinds of things that you should be looking for. What else? How might the role of compliance change when AI has full access? to these kinds of archives? And that is one of those, that's an excellent question. I don't really have an answer to it because my crystal ball is kind of fuzzy at this point in time. But I can give you some, and these are opinion insights. I don't have any studies or anything around this, but this is what I'm seeing in these kinds of situation. Compliance is going to change in a couple of different ways. One, the mechanisms and tools that we use to find the documents is going to change substantially. Now, and I'll give you an example inside our organization, and we're a small organization, so it changes, but we use Microsoft Copilot and SharePoint and OneDrive. Copilot's fantastic because I can go in and I can say, find me a document like this, okay? And it will search OneDrive and SharePoint and give me a list and say, here you are. Well, now imagine that in a compliance scenario that I can search active, maybe every employee's OneDrive scenario. If everybody uses SharePoint efficiently, searching all SharePoint to find it, and searching the records management archive and searching the digital archive. So now it's got this ability to go across all of these and find these. More importantly, it's got the ability to understand context. So even though a document might not have, and I'm notorious for this when I name, for example, presentations, I name it on a presentation that makes perfect sense to me today. But 6 months from now, somebody says, didn't you do a presentation on that? Oh, yeah, I did. I don't remember the name. I have no clue. So now I'm trying to figure out what keywords I might have put in. But things like Copilot, AI searching, gives me the ability to look inside that document and pull that out. Now, a lot of the records management tools have search capabilities inside of the actual content associated with the files, but AI goes beyond that and now looks at internal relationships, internal comprehension, especially well-trained AI, and is going to be able to look at it and go, this PDF has 4 fields that related to it, or content associated with it that is related to that, or may be related to that. So it's going to change there. But that poses a substantial problem. And we're seeing this now start to surface in different areas as people are using AI, especially around audit and compliance proofs. So compliance is about doing what you said you were going to do the way that you said you were going to do it. You have a standard. This is how we do things. I need to prove that I did it that way, that I set the prices that way, or I moved the document, or whatever I did, okay? But if AI is in there doing things and it's more of a black box, how can we demonstrate that it's doing the right thing? How can we demonstrate compliance associated with that? And one of the reasons why the digital archive is so valuable is because if we're using AI just to find things and search things, then we can demonstrate we had all the things and we found all the things that we were supposed to find, because a human's going to cross-check those. So that's going to shift, is how do we demonstrate? And if we're using AI in a more active role, in a generation or creation role inside of our organization, it's going to change compliance, because how are we going to prove that the AI followed the rules that we had in place? Now, that comes down on humans in the loop following the rules. But we see a lot of circumstances where somebody's writing a document using AI to start the process, changing it, and people are going, yeah, but it was half written by AI. Okay, is that a problem? Well, if your rules say you can't do that, then yes, that's a problem. So that's what we need, is we need rules around when it can be used so that we can demonstrate compliance using AI. And that's going to be a challenge at the compliance level. What are the technological barriers to adopting AI in enterprise environments? That is another huge question. There's a lot associated with that, and all organizations are facing it today. And there's a simplistic view that says, I'm going to use ChatGPT or Copilot, and therefore this is what I need to do. And so in the case of us, we have a Copilot license, so it works on our data. And we're confident that Microsoft's isolated our data and nobody else can see it. It's in SharePoint, that's isolated, that's all good. But how people are allowed to use it, how they're going to be able to use it, how we're going to ensure that they are using it and using it correctly. How are we going to make sure that the person is still responsible for the delivery of the stuff rather than AI responsible for it? Again, comes back to the compliance and audit capabilities. But one of the challenges that we see, and this is the whole conversation around a good digital archive, is that the data and the information that the AI is working on is often very, very poor in organizations. The data a lot of organizations have works for the business and it does the job, but it has no consistency across business units, sometimes has no consistency across different groups in the same business unit. That form has this structure and that form has this structure. Both of them have an address and the address is a completely different structure. Well, the AI's got to figure all of that out. So now the AI is now going, well, which is a good address structure? Which is a good way of sorting this stuff out? And so data quality, we're seeing from a forms perspective, but as a data quality in your business environment, two different systems, again, have different address structures because one only works in this jurisdiction and that one is global. AI's got to deal with all of that. And so creating a homogenized data architecture along with a digital archive is a critical factor, and that's often a blocker in effective use of the AI to be able to really leverage and take it to the next level. If there's any other questions, feel free. I'm not seeing any, so what I'm going to do is let you go at this point in time. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And again, happy to get on a call and talk through these things in more detail. Please drop us a line at marketing@4point.com if you're at all interested in it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.